Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the More Than This podcast. I'm recording this on November 7, 2021. In this episode, I'm going to be exploring what witchcraft means to me. It's a really personal episode. I'm going to pull from some historical ideas about witchcraft, what's going on with witchcraft right now, because it's certainly having a moment in the culture right now, and diving into why I think that witchcraft, for me at least, and the way I write and teach about it, is really a journey of healing into our own unique wholeness, that it's about the journey home to something that is so much a part of us and lives deeply in our soul. Through witchcraft, we can become so much more. If we answer the call, the cackling, the mysterious figure who comes to us in dreams, if we follow her, them, whatever gender they may present to us, if we follow that figure deeper into ourselves, it opens us to a beautiful pathway of becoming who we are truly put into this life to be. I hope this episode inspires you to explore what witchcraft means to you. I do firmly believe that it is a deeply personal practice, that it is a spiritual practice, and that the time of the witch has come in terms of our society, that we are in a very crossroads moment. We see all the things that are going on with the pandemic, politically, socially. We see a lot of institutions that were upheld being crumbled, as we strive for a more equal society, for true justice. And as we are dismantling, of course, all of these institutional problems that have caused so much oppression for so many, the witch is very much part of that cluster of those who have been othered by the mainstream, othered by the power structure for hundreds and hundreds of years. And for me, the practice of witchcraft is ultimately about standing in our own power, healing, and connecting to the deeper world. It is, for me, a way to become so much more than my personal problems, the calamities of everyday life and the big traumas that befall us all. And it is a way to remind me that the world is so much more than the physical, that there is this deeper, richer, endless universe that we are connected to. I absolutely love practicing my version of witchcraft. For me, witchcraft is delineated from other spiritual paths in a couple of ways. And I think the most important way for me that witchcraft is separate from other paths, equally legitimate paths, I'm not here to criticize anybody else's path, is through the practicing of magic, through the working with stones and bones, and for me, most importantly, plant medicines, in a way that is intentional and desired to bring out a goal, to render into flesh what has only existed as force, to use those talismans that we create, blessing bowls, sigils, whatever it is we create, to take something that was purely in the energetic field and give it a physical incarnation. I think that is, for me, what separates witchcraft from other spiritual practices. witchcraft has a long, fascinating, gory, gorgeous history. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I think there's lots been written about that. But there is a long trail behind the witch and the practices of witchcraft. And it's undeniable. We have to, the first episode, I called it The Witch in the Room. And whenever we dialogue with the witch in the room, whether we're the witch in the room and we're talking to ourselves, or we're engaging with the archetype of the witch as a spirit, there's a lot. There is a lot. It is a heavy mantle. It is a heavy cloak. And those pointy witch shoes can pinch as much as they can get us moving forward and give us a great deal of momentum, because I think for some of us, for me certainly, that mantle of the witch and those pointy shoes are comfortable. For me, before I get into talking about magic and so on, I want to talk about other ways, other kind of constructs associated with perhaps performing magic, and again, the type of natural magic that I teach and write about and that I practice myself, which is focused upon working with plant medicines. I don't practice a magic or a spiritual path that involves like calling forth angels or even demons or anything like that. My magic is very natural, often based in astrology, always growing from plants. For me, this kind of natural magic is about leaning into my own personal fate. What the Morai, those sisters of fate, have spun for me. It's about going more into that. It's not necessarily about changing what I guess the soul contract is for this life. It's about how do I make the most of it, and how do I solve this problem from within me. How can I be the agent of change rather than a magic that is what I would call wishful thinking, that so and so is going to just drop $10,000 into my bank account or so on. For me, the question is always, how can I make a talisman, sigil, blessing bowl, etc., that helps activate within me what is necessary to solve my financial problems? I wanted to lead with that distinction because I think it's a very important one. And again, I'm not here to criticize anyone who does anything differently. I want to be really clear for myself and for anyone listening about what I mean when I talk about magic, what I mean when I talk about witchcraft. And let's loop back to delineating what I'm talking about from other paths that I think are very similar and certainly often very helpful and healing for some, but that don't have that kind of soul resonance for me. And, I've explored these things over the years because personally, and to be completely kind and honest here, it would be a hell of a lot easier for me if instead of saying I write about witchcraft, if I called it something else. Like, for F's sake, if I removed the word witch from my work, my whole career trajectory would have been so much easier, because witch and witchcraft carries a lot of weight. It's hot for some. I mean, it's hot for all of us, but for some, it's hot in a way that isn't nourishing. It's hot in a burning way. And it impacts how my work is received in the world by some. So it would have been easier if I would have just called myself a light worker, a shaman, or what I have been called in different places, an energy healer or energy worker in more mainstream publications, and which is fine. I've also called a spiritual teacher, and I use that term when I'm in certain rooms, when being the witch in the room isn't going to be helpful to me or anybody else. So again, I'm not picking on any of those other terms that might include energetic work, manifestation, or even the practice of magic. I think magic is absolutely beautiful to me. To me, magic is sacred creativity that is intentional and focused and strategic, and it's about incorporating natural forces that exist already that are not what I would call supernatural, that are not like entities and so on. I really am focused on natural magic. So I hope we've got that all clear. It's been a bit of a preamble to get us into this episode. Let's begin. I'm going to begin the podcast episodes how I begin all of my gatherings with students and so on, by igniting a candle and creating a sacred space for us all here. If you're listening, it's just a second to get things going here. So what we do in my school, the Covina Institute, is we use the candle as a symbol of the sacred fire that is the soul, that is the divine eminence of the goddess. In the next episode, I am going to get into talking about Hecate as a goddess and as a force and so on. But in this episode, I really want to talk about practice, what witchcraft is to me. So let's begin by casting out, banishing, purifying the space, which we do with the circle 3 times counterclockwise. Just relieving any distress, anything that's blocking us right now or binding us and not being able to be fully present, and just kind of, if you can, seeing that spiraling out. And then we cast the circle around 3 times clockwise in a beautiful symbolic gesture of protection, and then always a blessing. Today I have selected a sprig of juniper. This is some fresh juniper from my property, wild juniper, and I offer you the beautiful energy of juniper, which is of course associated with purification and magic, medicine, and mystery. Such a wonderful, wonderful all-purpose plant ally that we can work with in so many ways. Now set those on the altar, which for me is the hub of my spiritual practice. So I always, after we have the opening ceremony, I always read an invocation to cast the energy for the time together. So for this episode, I'm reading from my book, Entering Hecate's Garden, The Magic, Medicine, and Mystery of Plant Spirit Witchcraft. So this invocation is a little poem I wrote when I was trying to grapple with what witchcraft meant to me personally. I was unwanted, and witchcraft was my medicine. I was left broken, and witchcraft was my medicine. I fell into the abyss, and witchcraft was my medicine. I walked through the fire, and witchcraft was my medicine. I healed, and witchcraft was my medicine. I stand in my power, and witchcraft is my medicine. And for me, witchcraft is medicine, because the archetype of the witch as a spirit that is vast and has so many forms, so many expressions, that is healing. When I say witch, I feel more myself. When I say I am a witch, I feel more myself. And when I say I practice witchcraft, I feel more myself. There is something about this that occupies space in the center of my being. And of course, this can be problematic because, you have neighbors that give you a hard time. For me as a professional, it's, certain people, it's really been used against me and so on. But I'm going to tell you this, and maybe you'll be able to relate to this, that all the hassles that the external world can throw at me because I say I am a witch and I practice witchcraft, all of those hassles, issues, the way people will judge, and so on, all of that pales in comparison to how effing good it makes me feel to say I am a witch and I practice witchcraft. So people can come at me with their hate and their misunderstandings and even their fetishization of me. I can protect myself from all of that because I am a witch and I practice witchcraft. But whatever they throw at me, whatever the haters throw at me, and let me tell you, I've gotten hate mail. I've had people burn my books on Instagram. I had people make videos about me and go on dedicated hate campaigns. Even an organization that I used to be involved in, a member there was just out for blood for me. All of that, let me tell you, is nothing compared to how beautiful, empowered, and whole it makes me feel when I say I am a witch and I practice witchcraft. And I've been doing this for decades. And I have fought this. I have fought my natural inclination, this thing that exists as part of me. I've fought it so many times and I'm done fighting it. And wherever you're at in your journey, if this rings true for you and you, like me, just love practicing magic, natural magic, I'm not going to comment on other forms of magic. I don't do them. That's not my lane. If that resonates with you and you love it, you love witchcrafting, welcome. We are kindred. So let's dive in. I've talked a little bit about what I mean by magic, talked a little bit about medicine. Something else I want to talk about is the mystery of witchcraft and what that means to me. And one of the big challenges I think that we have, just poking at my notes here to make sure I'm covering all my points. For those watching the video, you can see me moving around. If you're listening, you're probably wondering, what's that silence? For me, when it comes to the mystery, what I have learned in all these years is that the mystery demands our respect. And let me unpack what this means just a little bit. We are brought up in a world that demands rationalism. There is very little space in our society and often in education for mystery. We need to put the thing on the table, break the thing down, see how it works, and explain it all. Or we're going to build the thing, and we've got to have all the instructions, and there's no room for creativity. There's no room for mystery. And at the same time, creativity is so central to a meaningful life, whatever that is. We can be creative with what we put in our coffee in the morning. We are always being creative and we don't even know it. So creativity always demands mystery because there's always elements whenever we're making something new that are inexplicable, right? Why do you like a certain thing in your coffee? Why do you like to dress a certain way? There is so much about our human experience that science has no idea. I've been a researcher for decades now. And, when we give our questionnaires and do our interviews and try to tap into something like a close relationship or the nature of distress, there's so much more that it's just impossible for us to evaluate because there is a lot of mystery within us as humans. And for me, as a witch, the mystery is so, so important. So it means so much to me. It makes me emotional when I think about, I just want y'all to like lean into the mystery. Like if you're making a talisman, yes, you can do the research and you can look at the correspondences and you can get my books and you can do your spell and you can follow my instructions and so on. But ultimately, it's about your intuition. It's about the mystery. It's about adapting what feels right for you. It's not about, just following a rational formula. That's called logical positivism. And it's really been the driving force in our society for well over, like for many, many years. But like as a kind of overarching framework, it's been driving the cultural bus for well over 100 years. It's like if it's not logical and or positive, to really take a complicated philosophical idea and make it super simple, then it doesn't have value. And I think this is where witchcraft really can be the antidote to the lack of mystery in our society today. The lack of mystery in our own lives. When you do a talisman, go in confidently, go in boldly, trust your intuition, trust whatever dreams or other things come through to kind of guide you in the right direction. Do all of that. And then just let it go. Like just let it go. Let it be in the world. Let yourself be in the world wholly onto who you are. It's a journey. But absolutely, one of the big challenges for anyone who starts to practice witchcraft is to let go of rationality, because witchcraft is ultimately not rational. It's not designed to be rational. What is intuitive, what is of the deeper world, exists according to a whole different set of rules, which are largely unknowable, I think, to us as humans, so we can get some glimpses and gain some gnosis there over time. That it's not, a chronological cause and effect. If I do X, Y, well, it's not formulaic. There is mystery, and respecting the mystery, I think, is so important. And I encourage you, to find the ways that you respect the mystery of it all. And that magic, medicine, and mystery are, for me at least, the three ways that I can take what was numinous and is so far greater than me and apply it to kind of these three different groupings. When I talk about, I want to revisit magic just for a couple of minutes. When I talk about practicing magic, I strongly feel that to be a practicing witch means you actually do some form of magic. And again, I'm only focusing on the natural magic that I practice and teach and write about, that you are doing these things. Now, this can be an elaborate, if you've got my books, there's a lot of elaborate different workings in there. And it can be also really simple. If you are new to all of this, getting with your candle, forming an intention in your mind and seeing that candle as an agent of release, the smoke from the candle, or as a fire that illuminates, or if you want to get rid of something, even when you snuff the candle out, seeing that as the end of whatever it is you're trying to bring it into. Sitting with a candle alone in a dark room is fabulously accessible to most of us. Even if you can't have a lit candle, you can work with one of those LEDs. You can work with a flashlight on your phone if that's what you've got. You know, being a witch and practicing witchcraft doesn't mean that we need fancy things, although I love my fancy things. I love to repurpose things, make things, find things out in the natural world. You know, you don't need to spend a nickel to practice witchcraft. It is about that creativity, clear intentions. I write a lot about setting intentions in the Keeping Her Keys book, and intentions have energy and they can be vivified and have a life to themselves that becomes an allyship with us as we do the work to achieve whatever desired outcome we have. So for me, magic isn't about doing the thing. You do a spell and then you do nothing. I know there's some practices that are like you know, you take the candle of the saint and you bury the candle of the saint in a certain way, and then you do nothing. I'm not criticizing that. I'm saying for me, it is all about bringing into alignment what I am doing with whatever magic I am doing, and then respecting the mystery of it all and knowing that I am caught up in what I believe I often call a soul contract or a life code, or even the great work it's sometimes called. That is my life. That is so much more than maybe what this certain problem that I'm doing this working for. And when I practice magic, it's always focused on adapting whatever it is within me that I feel needs to be changed in order to bring about my desired outcome. And sometimes, yes, indeed, if a person or a situation is really problematic, I will bind that onto itself, not in a harmful, mean-spirited or malevolent way, but in a way that eases tension. And magic for me is all about the root, the intuition, and the emotions. I think magic lives in the emotional self. You know, and emotions are of the body, very much driven by our intuition. We have emotions. We don't think our emotions into being. Like our emotions activate our thoughts. So for me, that's where magic lives. It lives in the emotion. I feel this way now, and I desire to feel a different way, or even I desire to feel more of that way. So let's move on to why witchcraft is medicine for me. In the first episode, I mentioned that witchcraft is part of the witch archetype, for example. And I want to unpack what an archetype is just a bit more here. So I use a definition of archetype that is heavily inspired by the great Carl Jung and depth psychology in general. For me, an archetype is a force that has certain characteristics, abilities, has both illuminated and shadow aspects, and exists as one of the foundational spirits of the universe. Archetypes are sentient, they have wills, they have desires, they act on us, they press on us, we express them, and we engage with them. So for me, my lifelong dance has been with the archetype of the witch and finding my comfort space within that. That journey has been very medicinal for me, medicine for my soul. Being here today, recording this episode of the podcast, is medicine. It is something that heals me deeply in a way that really nothing else can. For me, the witch is that kind of mythic figure who, lives at the edge of town, has her herbs, her stones, her familiars, wanders in the woods collecting different things and uses them to heal herself and others. And she is also a scholar studying comparative religion, studying mythology, exploring in the 21st century, of course, personal development work. She's taking all of these things and putting them all together in a way that is deeply enriching and meaningful for her. And I intentionally use the word her because any discussion about witchcraft is soul medicine, I believe we need to put gender on the table as well. So for me, I'm a cis white woman. Um, the meaning of which, play on words there, the meaning of which has, certain things that carries with it, right? Certain weights of the past, of discrimination, of so on. I come from a dirt floor poor background. So there's a lot there for me to say that I see the witch as her. It doesn't mean that there isn't other expressions. It doesn't mean what I'm saying is how it has to be for you. It's just this is my experience, my understanding of the witch. We can have very different understandings of that, and it's perfectly okay. I'm not diminishing however you experience the witch and witchcraft by saying this is how I experience such things. I love diversity. It enriches me. I think it enriches the web of the world. And I'm really tired of all of this crazy siloing that goes on in certain corners where, people are saying, well, if you don't do this, you're not a witch. And if you don't do that, you're not a witch. And you said that wrong, so you're not a witch. Like, I try to stay out of that fray. Once in a while, I get dragged into it. Honestly, however you experience the witch and however you practice witchcraft, if it is nourishing to your soul, if it is healing to you, and I would also say if it is in general good for the world and good for those in your lives, um, then go for it. Just you do you. And for heaven's sake, for Hecate's sake, step away from that fray where it is all about fractalization and trying to like take something that is vast and beautiful, eternal and numinous and sacred and like rationalize it. Just let your practice of witchcraft be beautiful soul medicine for you. And I know this can be really difficult when you first get started, especially nowadays when there is so much information out there. In many ways, I feel like I'm so thankful that for me, the witch and practicing witchcraft and doing little spells and so on, for me, I had like a book and a friend. I didn't have all of this information because it's a lot. And I know so many people get overwhelmed. And I'm going to talk about getting overwhelmed when you're new to witchcraft in the Hecate's help desk segment that's coming up in just a little bit. So I think in conclusion, I just have to say that I absolutely love everything about my position within that mighty archetype of the witch. For me, the witch has scared the life into me. For me, the history of the witch in our society as someone who has been persecuted, vilified, marginalized. I really identify with that in my own personal journey as well. I also love all the mythology, the stories of Medea and Circe, who I write about in Entering Hecate's Garden. I really identify with these figures who were often misunderstood. Maleficent would be like a common pop culture reference from today, that were often misunderstood, and that perhaps they leaned more into shadow. And I find for me that they are cautionary tales about making different choices with my life. And they're also inspirational in that they show me, and again, I'm coming from my perspective here, that they show me that a woman can be powerful, that she can be mysterious, that she doesn't need to rely on others, and that there is so much to the world of plant medicine, and there is so much to the crafting of talismans and so on. And I'm just finished with saying what I do isn't witchcraft. I'm, finished with it. Wherever you're at in your life, maybe you're not in the place where you can be talking openly. I don't need to preach this. I don't need to walk down the street saying this to people. I'm here in the podcast and in my work talking to people who I feel have an affiliation, but ultimately I'm doing this to talk to people as a way of helping you explore what makes sense in the center of your being. So now let's move on to overwhelm and starting witchcraft. So this is the Hecate's help desk question of the week. Okay, so I get asked this so often, and a couple of years ago, I was writing an article for Bustle magazine, Bustle magazine, which I just love that magazine. And I wrote this article, and it was, this is Hecate. This is what I mean by Hecate and witchcraft. It was very kind of like higher self, very academic, and it's super boring on retrospective. And the editor came back to me and she said, "You need to tell them how to do something." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, you need to tell them how to do something." And I think that's like the key here. It's that because there's so much information out there today, there's all this stuff coming at us all the time that doesn't include like how to do things in an accessible way that makes sense for our busy lives. Not all of us have access to like a really extensive apothecary full of, exotic oils and things from overseas. Some of us have ourselves and maybe some herbs in the kitchen. If you have candle and a salt, you can do a great spell. You don't need all these things. So you see a lot of books that are very exotic, and I have such a huge apothecary, but I also know, if I'm out in the world and I need to do some kind of energetic work, I always keep a big thing of salt in my car, because salt will solve most of the problems in the world energetically. So there's a lot, right? We get overwhelmed because there's so much information coming at us. And so how do we get started? When there's TikToks and there's YouTubes and there's podcasts and there's books and there's like a gazillion things, and we're just collecting all this information. How do we go from being like the one who experiences witchcraft as like, I'm just absorbing, taking things in, to the one who is doing the magic and putting the things out into the world, by like what I call sacred creativity, or, spell casting. Like I mentioned earlier, I really believe like get a candle, sit with the candle, see the flame, as either burning away the problem or as illuminating the problem. Just go there. Shut down social media. Get into the intuition. Trust yourself. Recovering from all the programming that we've been thrown our whole lives is enormous. Like, it's just so hard. And I'm always so blown away, even when someone like buys my book or comes into my school, because I'm like, wow, like you are so courageous. Like right there, you are being an overcomer. Like you are resisting what you've been taught and, kind of coded, like they've tried to code into you your whole life. So well done. So the first thing I have to say in terms of getting started with practicing witchcraft is good for you. Good for you just being here and listening to this. And trust your intuition. Get with a candle. Maybe add a botanical, do something really simple like what I did with the juniper, and just open up the mind, open up the imagination. The role of imagination can often be really vilified, and there can often be a discussion where, like, well, is it real or is it my imagination? There is nothing more real than your imagination. It's in the same thread as dream denial. Like, say, well, dreams aren't important. Like, the imagination is where we spend our whole entire lives. Trust it. Trust what comes into that mind screen of yours. If you want to do a spell, let's say you want to do a spell because you're having a hard time focusing. This is a big one with all this information coming at us. One of the spells could be help me focus on what I should be studying, help me focus on what I should be doing. So ask yourself, what does focus look like to you? So, what are some of the symbols of being focused? If you're a tarot card person, the Queen of Swords, she's very focused. Look at her. Maybe use that card as part of your spell. What else means focus to you? One of my things I do every new moon month is choose a word for that month. That helps me focus. So write a word, whatever it is you want to do. My word for this month is launch, because I'm launching the podcast. And I have it right here on the wall beside me as a drawn talisman. I've got it in my agenda. Words are magic. So choose a word that means focus. Maybe it's getting off of social media. So maybe your words will be less social media, and make a beautiful talisman around it. Use herbs if you're so inclined, that bring clarity and focus to them. So just building the spell like that. I love Judica Illa's books on spellcrafting. She's got an amazing encyclopedia and more out there, and they are great sources of inspiration. You can follow them verbatim, or you can use them as an inspiration. So when it comes to doing your own magic, practicing your own witchcraft, start small, stay focused, eliminate noise. There is a lot of, I would almost call it like pollution, because there's so much information coming at us all the time. If you want, to get into a more meaningful practice, absolutely meditation is key. I write a lot about meditation. I teach a lot of meditation. I'm going to be talking about that more in a future episode, because meditation really helps us get into that flow within, and also the flow of the deeper world. So I think that's another key, and I think that's deserving of a whole episode. So that concludes this discussion about what practicing witchcraft means to me. I hope it inspires you to explore what it means to you, and also gives you some momentum for maybe doing your own little bit of candle magic, or a word talisman or something like that. Thanks so much for watching and listening.